Americans for Fair Taxation presents the Weekly Chairman's Report, written by Steve Hayes, president of Americans for Fair Taxation, and recorded by Bob Paxton, a volunteer with the Florida FAIRtax Educational Association. And now, this week's Chairman's Report.
Hello, I'm Bob Paxton with the AFFT Chairman's Report for Friday, September 17th, 2021. Who benefits from the complexities of the income tax? In order to maintain a safe and civilized society, it's important that people respect and obey the rules and laws that define what's acceptable behavior and what is not. For example, traffic laws and traffic signals exist to ensure that everyone can drive safely from one part of town to another, and people who disobey those laws endanger themselves and everyone around them. We also understand that in order for a government to provide services to its citizens, it must first collect taxes from those citizens in order to pay for the things that the citizens demand from their government. Now, of course, no one really enjoys paying taxes. We'd rather spend our money on ourselves, and every dollar we pay in taxes is a dollar we can't use for our own consumption. Senator Russell B. Long served 7 years as chairman of the Senate Finance Committee, which handles tax legislation. Senator Long said, "Most people have the same philosophy about taxes. Don't tax you, don't tax me. Tax that fella behind the tree." Now, from the time the first government levied the first tax right on up to the present day, governments have struggled to find ways to extract the taxes they need in a way that the citizens will at least find acceptable. So, why do we have such a complex income tax system? The Merriam-Webster Dictionary defines simple as not hard to understand or do. It defines complicated as difficult to analyze, understand, or explain. The fair tax is an example of a simple tax system. It has the following characteristics. It's easy to calculate and collect. There are no personal tax returns. It's not possible to hide the tax. It's difficult to evade. It's applied uniformly. It has a prebate to ensure fairness. Has no special benefits for the wealthy or special interests. It's least harmful to both individual taxpayers and the economy in general. It helps protect domestic jobs from being eliminated by foreign imports. There's no IRS, and it shows the true cost of government. The federal income tax, on the other hand, is an example of a complex tax system. Here are its characteristics. It's difficult to calculate and collect. Requires both personal and corporate income tax returns. It's easy to hide. The cost of the income tax is included in the prices of all the goods and services we buy. It's relatively easy to evade. It's not applied uniformly. It contains special benefits for the wealthy and special interests. It's costly and inefficient to administer. It's costly and inefficient to comply with. It favors imports over domestically produced goods, leading to fewer American jobs. As time goes by, it requires a bigger and bigger, more cumbersome and more abusive IRS, and it hides the true cost of government. So, question. If both the simple and the complex tax systems collect the same amount of revenue, why would any sane government choose the complex system? Why would any government in its right mind not just refuse to implement the simple system, but continue to make the complex one even more complex and more incomprehensible year after year? The Roman orator and statesman Marcus Tullius Cicero used the expression cui bono in several of his attacks on corrupt Roman officials. Cui bono is a question. It means, who benefits? Now, obviously, almost all of us will benefit from the simple system. So, the question becomes, who benefits from the complex system? The people who benefit from the complex system generally fall into one of three categories. First, there are those who've been able to purchase or otherwise obtain special treatment that enables them to pay far less income tax than they would otherwise have to pay. Next are those who actually profit from having a complex system. This group includes people like lobbyists, tax preparers, and other tax professionals. For them, the more complicated the system is, the better. Complicated rules make it easier to hide special benefits for the lobbyist clients, and the harder the tax system is to understand, the more money the tax people can charge for their services. And finally, there are people in government who arrogantly believe that they are smarter than the rest of us. They believe that we little people must be brought under their control for our own good. They see a complex income tax system as a way to ensure that everyone acts in the ways that they have decided are the best for us. If we do what they want, we get rewarded. If we don't, we get punished with higher income taxes. Now, those in the first two groups are motivated primarily by greed. At some level, they may understand that they're profiting at other people's expense, but most find a way to justify it. It's those in the third group who are most ardently opposed to replacing the complex system with the simple one. And unfortunately, these are the people who by and large get to decide what our tax code looks like. If the fair tax is ever going to replace the income tax, we the people are going to have to rise up and demand it. In conclusion, during the course of a meal with the accountant who prepares his tax returns, Albert Einstein said, "The hardest thing in the world to understand is income taxes." The accountant replied, "Well, there's one thing more difficult, and that's your theory of relativity." No, Einstein replied, "That's easy." So, the next time you find yourself wondering why our government stubbornly clings to an incredibly complex and incomprehensible tax system when there's a much simpler, fairer, and better way to do it, ask, cui bono? Who benefits? It's important that people who support the fair tax understand the reasons that certain groups of people oppose it. And it's also important to know that the people who make up those three groups above comprise a very small minority of the country's population, maybe 1% at the most. Now, since we still have elections, we still get to decide who represents us in government. We have the power to send representatives to Congress who will act in our best interest and replace the income tax with the fair tax. The only thing supporters of the income tax can do is try to divide us so that we're not voting for a sane system. We just need to keep pointing out the insanity of the complex income tax and the benefits of the fair tax to everyone. Once our friends and neighbors are properly informed about the fair tax, it should be easy to get them to vote with us in favor of a sane tax system. So, what can each of us do? We can write letters and make calls to our elected representatives demanding that if the government really wants to eliminate the burden of filing income tax returns, they should enact the fair tax and do away with tax returns altogether. The great 18th century Irish statesman Edmund Burke made a statement that applies in many ways. Nobody made a greater mistake than he who did nothing because he could only do a little. Take back control. Help us pass the fair tax. The IRS will be gone and we'll pay our taxes when we make purchases. We, not the ruling class and their minions in D.C., will decide how much federal tax we pay. We'll know how much tax we really pay because taxes will no longer be hidden from us. They'll be shown on every retail receipt. So if you have friends who don't know about the fair tax, send them to fairtax.org. Have them watch the whiteboards under how it works, and if they agree, ask them to please join us. Then, contact your members of Congress and the President and demand that Congress pass the fair tax, the only truly fair tax.
This has been the Weekly Chairman's Report, written by Steve Hayes, President of Americans for Fair Taxation. Check back every week for news and information about the fair tax and learn why the fair tax should replace our antiquated federal income tax system. If you'd like to receive a copy of the Chairman's Report in your inbox every week, sign up at FAIRtax.org.